What's going on, good people? Rich here.
It's your girl Ray Pete back in the building. Shout out to school. And welcome back to another episode of the Culture Garden Podcast. What's going on, Rich?
What's going on, Ray P? How you feeling?
I'm good. I feel really good. Tired but good.
Feel you,
It looks
man.
like we on a little switcheroo
It's
because I'm home and you in the hotel.
Freaky Friday. Freaky Friday. I was definitely gonna say that. We definitely swapped out spots. I am in the hotel. I'm in Cleveland right now, doing some work.
Mhm.
Like I said, a few more weeks, I'll be a resident in the city of Cleveland, a
Hey,
Clevelander. Even though I'm always a Cincinnatian at heart.
for sure.
That's another story for another day. I'm still processing the move and everything like that. But shout out to school.
Shout out to school.
Shout out to School's Guilty Pleasures. He told me his next movie. He told me he was going to be on the episode with him. I can't remember if that's coming out this Friday or next Friday, but he does have something waiting for y'all. So shout out to School, man. He's not going to be with us today. Um, Shout out to We Got Y'all.
Shout out to We
Um,
Got Y'all.
yeah, man. Ray P's television podcast. I didn't talk to you about this yet. On Good Earners, there's some scheduling stuff going on with Good Earners, the Sopranos podcast that I'm a part of. Shout out to Mo. Mo's birthday is this upcoming Sunday.
Happy birthday, Mo.
Um, yeah, happy birthday to Mo, man. And instead of starting we just wrapped up season 4. Instead of starting a season and then taking like 2 or 3 weeks off, we was like, all right, let's not do that, but let's throw some kind of filler episode. So we had this whole idea about this episode that we were going to talk about. And just in the midst of organic conversation, it turned into the origin story of Good Earners. Like, how did this podcast even come about? Like, how do y'all know each other? What happened? Yada, yada, yada. And I was thinking, you know what? That'd be a cool thing. Like, as there's not really much to talk about for We Got Y'all right now, as far as like deep television breakdowns and episodic television breakdowns.
Yeah,
But I was like, it'd be cool if people might dive into the world of Ray P and Rich.
for
Gotta get a
sure.
little bit of background on because I'm not gonna say it's the most interesting story, but it is interesting. Like, We Got Y'all was never supposed to be what it
Yeah.
is today.
Yeah.
And how we got into that, and obviously our relationship, because a lot of people compliment us on the chemistry, which is 100% organic and years and years and years in the making. So I was like, you know what, that'd be cool just to warm up the mics a little bit, get the feedback pop, and let people know we still thinking about them. But because this summer is gonna heat up, we got some shows coming.
For sure. That's what I was gonna say. I am very much still watching TV, if y'all know me. But it's just not stuff I am passionate about, despite how good it is. I keep saying it, but if y'all really knew how much I've been in the trenches, no excuses, but whatevs. Which is why I have not done it. But like, there are lots of shows like The New Look on Apple TV, phenomenal. The Royal Palm on Apple, phenomenal. It's a new season of Loot out. Girls on the Bus on Max. Supergirls on All Black / Prime. Like, there are shows that I'm watching. Like I said, I'm gonna actually finish my reel that's been in drafts for however long.
It's all good. It's all good. I still have mine. I have stuff cut out. I promise you I'm working on it. I told you I'll hold me accountable.
For
I
sure.
promise it's coming. It's coming on the way. I see. And to your point, Ray, that's just something we've learned through trial and error. Like, we've learned, especially with the podcast, like We Got Y'all. We've had some things where it was like, man, like, I like this, but I don't want to talk about this. So it's a pick and choose type of thing. Yeah, absolutely. But we definitely will check in, and like I said, maybe do an origin or something like that, because I think that'd be cool to talk about, let you guys know what's going on. And before we move into today's episode, there will be spoilers, but it's not that type of film, so I guess it's not necessarily needed. Please check the link tree below for episode description, all our information, YouTube page, the whole nine. Please remember to subscribe, rate, review. That really helps us. Word of mouth, all of that helps this whole podcast thing grow. And the film that we are doing today is Origin. Origin came out technically last year in 2023, but it was released in theaters January 19th, I believe, of this year. Limited screens, wasn't shown a lot. It was if you guys remember our Black Reel Award episode, we had that as the film that we couldn't get to in time to record because it wasn't out yet. And I have a question for you about that I'll ask soon. But Ava DuVernay, who ironically we were joking about in our girls trip episode when we were discussing Black women directors and who could actually direct something like Girls Trip, and would we feel better with a woman directing? We talked about Ava DuVernay, like, well, she's not a comedy woman, and she sure isn't. Yeah, she sure isn't, because Origin is a lot, Rachel.
Yeah,
it's a lot. I want to let everybody listening know right now, this is not going to be your traditional Culture Garden episode. We just spent a few minutes talking about We Got Y'all. This is going to be more of a We Got Y'all style, where it's just commentary, kind of reactionary more than analytical. It's not like we're breaking down scene by scene. I think for myself and Rachel, this is going to be more of how this movie made us feel.
Yeah.
Along with some certain, performances and things that stood out to keep it on the movie side. But Ray P, this was your week to choose the film. What made you go with Origin?
Honestly, I saw that it was available on Prime, and to your point earlier, we didn't get to it during the Black Reel Awards, and we had from Christmas to the middle of January, it just wasn't available in time to record in our respective areas. And then even again, it was limited showings. So since it was at our disposal and sorry.
No, you good.
A blank.
That's why
it was at our disposal. I wanted to check it out. It was hoping to be pleasantly surprised. I'll be honest. I did not really know what it was going to be about. I did very little research, even in preparation for Black Reels. I just knew it was an Ava DuVernay movie. I knew that it was critically acclaimed. And that was it for me. I'm like, okay, I would just off the strength, I knew it was quote unquote going to be good. And I just was like, let's do it.
Yeah.
It didn't get its flowers the way that it should. So here we are.
Absolutely. I love it. I love the two things that you do a lot that I love in regards to our films. One, you pick more current films, keep things like kind of a little bit newer. I know school of myself, we get in that nostalgia bag and dig into like the 90s and 2000s. I love digging into the newer ones and having discussions about them. The second one I can't think of off the top of my head. That's why we're doing this off live. But there is something that I will remember. I think that, well, let me ask you this first before I get into my point. How did you feel about the well, all right, let me back up. Let me kind of get into this with what I was thinking. I don't know the last time I've watched a film without doing research or watching a trailer. Legitimately cannot tell you. I can't even pretend to guess. And there was something kind of satisfying about watching something and watching it unfold and not really knowing what was going on. And I think I think this film could have easily been one thing, and I don't think anyone but Ava could have turned it into something else. I'm not going to say, because it's a lot. If you haven't seen Origin, it's a lot.
Yeah.
It feels like a much longer watch than it is. It's emotionally heavy. It leaves you questioning things, but it also opens up your mind to things and teaches you things as well. The one thing I'll say, and I've said this on numerous episodes, and one of my complaints about Hollywood, a lot of remakes, nothing fresh or original. Even though this is biographical, this film made me feel something.
Yeah.
And it wasn't about if it made me feel good. It wasn't about if it made me feel bad. It was deeper than that. It just made me feel something. And not just one singular thing. It took me through a wave of emotions. And they're not the simple surface level emotions that you can feel. Each emotion was deep,
For sure.
deep rooted in something.
Mhm. Mhm.
And there's moments, and I don't know what if this says anything about my maturity or just where I am in life. There were moments that were triggering, but
Mhm.
also okay. Like I
Yeah.
didn't respond the way I thought. Like at the beginning of this movie, when I see that Arizona and Skittles, I literally said out loud, like, I know that ain't Trayvon because
Yeah.
I'm not in the mood to go down this path right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you keep watching and it cuts away and you think you're safe because damn, I don't want to see that. I don't want to see any kind of trauma. And
Yeah.
then you get brought back into it again.
Yeah.
And it made me think like, okay, I don't want to see it, but I can see it.
Mhm.
And I know that wasn't for me. Like
For
that's
sure.
not in the movie for me to see. That's for other people that do need to see that
Yeah.
and do need to see the scene with Hal at the baseball park or at the pool, should I say, and certain things. So, very deep movie. I have a ton to say about it. We're going to talk about it. What were your opening thoughts after the watch, after your viewing, should I say?
So, to your point, it was a heavy watch, but also I don't really want to say evergreen, but refreshing in the end. Um I was happy that I saw it. Obviously,
Yeah,
watched it again. I don't know how much I revisited just because of what the movie is. It wasn't heavy in an if Bill Street could talk kind of way.
right,
You know
right.
what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
This but it was, kind of in the same vein. Not
Yeah,
parallel, but it could very easily put you in that same space. However, Bill Street, I have revisited several times. Like now that I'm thinking about it, I might watch tonight. This, I don't feel like that.
yeah. Um, Bill Street is different. It's different
Yeah.
because before I even get into that, did you know this was biographical? Did you even know this was based off a novel or a real
Okay.
person?
So,
Like
no.
while watching, I didn't know until the end credits, and it made sense, but I didn't know.
Once I saw the name, um, Isabel, what's the last name? Whitlocker.
Yes. I'm sorry. Let me pull that up for you. It is Isabel Wilkerson.
Wilkerson. Sorry, my apologies. Once I saw her name, I was like, "Oh, I know her name." If
Hmm.
y'all don't know, most of y'all don't, I'm minored in Africana studies.
Hmm.
Um, one of my line sisters is a race anthropologist, dare I call her that. She is
Hmm.
very big. She's like the dean of diversity at a law school, her law school. So I am very much into the blackness of it all or
Yeah.
the color of it all. So I actually have the book cast. I have not read it.
Okay. Okay. Um.
So it took me a second, but I'm like, wait a minute. And then when I asked my line sister, had she heard of it? And she immediately said, "Oh, isn't that the movie based off of Cast?" I was like, "Oh, yeah,
Sure.
it
Sure.
absolutely is." And I couldn't believe that it took me so long to put it together. But I mean, I guess I didn't actually open the book yet, despite it being on my shelf.
Yeah. I didn't know. Like I
Mhm.
said, I didn't know while watching, but it felt like a documentary.
Yeah.
Um. And once the credits came up, it made sense.
Mhm.
Made sense. Like, okay, then I get it because I didn't know there were certain times, like I mentioned, we opened up with Trayvon, and there are just certain moments throughout this film where I'm just like, what are you? Even with the personal tragedies
Mhm.
um, that we see Isabel go through, which, as we know, is her real life,
Yeah.
um, losing her husband, losing her mom, losing her cousin slash sister,
Yeah.
because they had that kind of relationship, and just seeing her deal with that on top of cats, and it just like you said, it doesn't make you feel on a Bill Street could talk. It almost makes you it questions do I care enough? Do I care enough to you laid out everything in front of me in this 2 hours or 20 minutes?
Yeah.
Do I care enough to go out and do something about it? Or have I lived enough life to just, and this is going to sound extremely pessimistic, have I lived enough life to know that I'm better off in my own bubble, building my own world? And this is such a huge problem. And we're so far behind the 8 ball that any effort to get this fixed is not going to happen. And dare I say, once again, very pessimistic, I would be shocked. I mean, extremely shocked if things like the caste system were cleared up in our lifetime. Like, I don't see it by a long shot. Like, it's not even close. It's not even on the radar. The conversations haven't even started happening. This is like the intro to the conversation.
In our lifetime, it does not happen. Right. Especially considering where we are with quote unquote critical race theory, DEI, the general lack of understanding and empathy towards our fellow man. Not to be cliche, but we are very much a divided country. And this movie focuses, quote unquote, from a worldwide standpoint. It's not just focused in the States. It touches on Nazi Germany. It touches obviously on the caste system in India. So while all that racism and dehumanization is linked, we aren't the sole focus. You know what I'm saying? Despite being embedded. So where we are, it makes books like Caste and films like Origin that much more important. There's a quote, which I believe she was at the Holocaust Museum, history that is not something about history being bound to repeat itself if it's not discussed. You know what I'm saying? Something to that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And while we see various Supreme Courts here, various governments go out of their way, Moms for Liberty, to remove actual history from the history books, to make it illegal to have, dare I say, these discussions, that is crazy. And we are shifting, not to make this crazy, but into like this dystopian society. And the reality is that we need each other.
Yeah.
And we are in a crazy, disjointed place because I don't know how humanity, quote unquote, perseveres in a situation like this with where we are and where it looks like we're heading as a society.
No, it's very well put. As a Black man, as a Black person, I appreciate that it wasn't solely based on racism in the United States, and it dug deeper. And I'll say that because it makes, I'm not gonna say feel better because that's not the right words. Yeah. Those aren't the right words. It makes you, it confirms the fact that it has to be deeper than that, right?
It's deeper than
when you look at it on, yes, it's deeper than rap. When you look at it on the surface, it doesn't, you don't have to be too emotionally mature to understand that you don't like me because of how my skin looks. It's very, very like, it's hard to wrap your mind around it. Like, how does that even work? Like, it doesn't make sense. So when you bind, when it's bound to something deeper, and you explore and look at this connective tissue, it's almost like, okay. Like, is racism never going to go away in the United States? At least for a long time. I won't say never. I want to keep some hope open. But it's just kind of embedded. Matter of fact, so this is one of the scenes that I do want to talk about.
Okay.
And it is the scene where Isabel is in Germany, and she's having wine with some friends,
Yeah.
and there's a German, Jewish, German. My apologies. I'm not sure which one goes first. That she's having a conversation with,
Mm-hmm. One,
and excuse me.
the woman, and then
Yes,
the
the woman. Yes, 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 yes. Um, and I want to bring up something. We'll get into the scene, but I do want to bring up something specific.
mm-hmm.
When you, they were 100% right when they talk about Nazi Germany, and they
Yeah.
had the conversation about the Confederates. Not only is the flag part of a state, but also statues being around. We all know this. If you're listening to this podcast and you're watching films like Origin, you know this. They literally wiped out every trace of Adolf Hitler.
Yeah.
In its remembrance. Like, it is a punishable crime to display a swastika. They eradicated that issue completely, scrub clean of it. We will make this right. This will never come back.
Yeah.
Right? I was watching The Shop. All right. LeBron has the show, The Shop. And of all people, I don't want to say that because he's an intelligent person, but he's a comedian. Seth Rogen. He made a great point, and it's always stuck with me from the time I watched that episode. And it ties into the scene. There's something about acknowledgement and knowing that you fucked up and admitting that you fucked up that can take you to the next level. And you can get to something as horrific as what Hitler did in Germany and make sure that never happens again. We all have, as a country, we bound together. I don't care if you don't like me, I don't like you. We at least agree we're not going to let that happen again. And that starts by acknowledgement, and that starts by wiping it out clean. And Seth Rogen's Canadian. And he was speaking from the standpoint of, I'm somebody who's Canadian, grew up in a different country, but I've also lived in this country long enough to notice some things.
Yeah.
And he says the fact that America has a problem acknowledging things like slavery is extremely odd, because you see other parts of the world go ahead and acknowledge their wrongdoings. And the example he gave was, I was in Canada the past weekend for a comedy show. We're at the comedy club. And before the show starts, there's a voice that comes on a microphone and just says, hey, ladies and gentlemen, before we get into the show, I just want to acknowledge that this is indigenous land. This land is not ours. The place that we are performing this comedy show, it belongs to someone else. We just want to take time and make sure the audience takes the time to recognize that. All right, let's go on with the show. It's just something as simple as acknowledging this is not our land. This belongs to somebody else. I know I'm not trying to get super, super deep into it, but it always astonishes me when you see, especially this being a presidential election, and trust me, this conversation is not going down that path. But you see politicians on the trail, and they're asked questions. They go to Breakfast Club, the black publications. They go to Breakfast Club, and that's a whole nother conversation. And they're asked questions such as, is there racism in this world? Or Madam Vice President Kamala is asked, is America a racist country? And they fumble around the answer. And it's just so odd to me, because nobody's saying you did it or you're responsible for it. Like, just acknowledge that it happened. Like, because now I feel like you're playing in our face by acting like we tripping, and it always gets turned into, that happened years ago. Like, why are y'all still complaining? It's just one of those things. And I don't know why we can't acknowledge it, other than the fact that that's never going to be in the plans. Like, it's by design that it's not acknowledged.
Yeah.
But what did you think about that scene as a whole? Because there's a lot to unpack
there. Okay. Two things. The first thing I want to say is the beautiful point. And at the end of the movie, Isabel is speaking to, I know that you are not responsible. We did not experience the 246 years of slavery, 100 years of Jim Crow. Well, depending on how old your parents are, they may or may not have definitely grandparents. And then redlining, gentrification, all the things that we see now in this whole 400 years, we can recognize that, no, we are not responsible. However, if we are responsible human beings, inhabitants of this earth, of this country, of this place, it is our job to work to make it a better place for the people coming after us, if we've learned anything, quote unquote, So
absolutely.
To your other point, that scene was crazy as hell. Also, something relatable that any Black person has had trying to explain racism and race in America. That conversation I have had in so many instances. And
Mm-hmm.
before, like I said, I studied AFST in college. So back then I was much more militant, this and the third now. And I'm a bit more reserved, but you find yourself wanting to have open and honest conversations with friends and or colleagues, depending on how cool y'all are. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and these microaggressions and just general, I don't want to say lack of understanding, but I just, nothing in me can see what you're saying the way that you said it. And I don't want to say, I don't want to call them like the trauma Olympics and the trauma war,
Mm-hmm.
oppression
Yeah,
Olympics, but it happens.
absolutely.
I know what it's like sometimes to shut down and not be able to get your rebuttal the way you need to rebut it out in the moment because you're so flabbergasted. You're so taken aback. Like, what the fuck,
Mm-hmm.
bitch?
Yeah, yeah, because even if you all right, even if your point is taken and it
Hmm.
makes sense, and what I mean, not when I say yours, not yours individually, I mean the other parties, whoever you're talking to.
Hmm.
Even if they say something and I get that and I understand that, this is one of those things I think only Black people will understand.
Hmm.
There's still something about you telling me about my shit.
The invalidation of my experience, because that's what it is. That's not what I'm trying to do to yours. I'm not invalidating yours in any capacity. I'm
Yeah,
listening to understand. I'm taking what you're telling me, sometimes at face value, like, oh, okay, damn, that's crazy. I didn't know that that happened to your people.
yeah,
We take it, hear it, acknowledge. There is no rebuttal to it. I'm not going to refute what happened in your
yeah,
history. But when it comes to us, there's all, not always, a good portion of the time, there's always a little something else. There's a question mark where I place a period. You know what I'm saying? Like, no, this,
yeah.
but you don't believe me?
Yeah, and it's almost like, all right, so even if you take the conversation, and like I said, if you've seen the film, you know exactly what scene we're talking about. Even if you take the conversation and say, hey, she was just saying that from a professional standpoint.
Hmm.
Like, you came to us saying you want to write a book. I'm letting you know that itself is not a book, it's just a framework,
Yeah.
right? I still think, and this is just my opinion, so it's not law, but I still think that you're still not qualified to tell me that in a direct sense. Like, that's
Mhm.
something you should tell me in a question.
Yeah.
Maybe you should ask me, are you sure this is a book?
Hmm.
Is there more to this that would make it a book so I can see it? Almost like her cousin said, like, can you
Yeah.
make me see that? Or maybe it was our publishers, which they would say, like, can you make me see this? Because if you can, that's a great book.
Hmm.
I don't know. It's just something about, and like I said, there's such a deep, deep, deep rooted traumatic shared experience that Black people have.
Hmm.
And, we're not taking it to the woe is me thing, but in moments like that, it comes out
Yeah,
because you're not qualified for that conversation.
for sure.
Even you are qualified in a completely different way, but not in the way that you're telling me. And
Yeah,
I'm sitting there where I don't even know what to say in response because I'm questioning how cool we even are right now.
for sure. And tone matters. I'll say the way that her publisher framed it was absolutely correct. And she said very much so, bitch, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. I don't see this
Right.
from what you've given me here. I don't know. That doesn't make sense to me. But I know that you are brilliant. And if you can turn it into what's in
Hmm.
your mind, then I think that that's going to be great. And it was.
Do you think? Let me ask you this. All right. I didn't think about this until you said it. So she pretty much said the same thing. They both said the same thing in completely
Mhm,
different ways.
mhm,
Do you think what I just explained as far as the questioning versus the statement? Do you think
mhm.
that's because she has no trauma in that way, the same way a Jewish woman would have as far as her history and family, or a Black person would have? Do you think she's more inclined to question it because she genuinely does not understand, and maybe, like I said, two people have the same conversation but in different ways? I don't know if that's making sense.
Well, we don't know that she's now also Jewish or some sort
That's
of.
fair. That's fair. That's
So
fair.
I won't give it that, but I do think, especially as a Jewish person in Germany, I do think that causes her to have a little extra sauce. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I would say that it makes her a little bit more resolute in her thought, versus the publisher.
Yeah.
And she does have a very different, maybe has a very different experience. Well, definitely in the sense that she still lives there, her
Yeah.
family and whomever else are still there. Much like us, we're still here, but the
Yeah.
experiences are different,
Yeah.
I spoke on it earlier, and I watched The New Look on Apple TV. And if you are a fashion person, please watch it. But it basically talks about the fashion industry during occupied Paris during
Okay.
World War II.
Yeah.
And it talks about the roles various designers played, primarily Christian Dior, Coco Chanel, side eye, Balmain, and just some other designers. But Christian Dior's sister is kidnapped by the Nazis. And we see, much like in this film, some of the experiences of the harsh realities of the concentration and death camps. The cutting of the hair, obviously the physical abuse, notes of the essential dehumanization that takes place. We need to see all of these stories from everything. So that just reminded me, or made me think, when she was talking, and while in Germany, not just the dinner table scene, even the flashback to when, the doctors, the Black PhD
Yeah. The
student,
concept. Are you talking about when they watching the burning of the books?
the burning of the books,
Yeah.
that immediate, you don't know what's going on here.
Yeah.
It immediately made me think of The New Look, just because of what we saw. And then even this, seeing it from not just a viewer's perspective or a Jewish person or non-Jew in Paris, but now here are these two Black Americans in Nazi Paris, in occupied Paris during the Nazi, I don't want to call it regime, but they took that.
Errors. I mean, yeah.
Yeah. It just made me think of that. Sorry, I feel like I'm rambling, but
No. You're good. You're good. That's what this. I mean, this is genuine. This is real conversation. This is something that, if the microphones weren't on and you and I were discussing this movie, these are the conversations we have anyway.
yeah, yeah,
So I get it. It's this is not a simple conversation, and this is not a simple topic or film to digest. It's not the reason we're even discussing this film in this way versus our traditional way is because it's hard to do in 48 hours. There's just too many layers,
for
way
sure.
too many. So it's perfectly fine if you gotta catch your thought.
Yeah,
I get it. I get it.
It just made me think to her, the friend, and I hate that I don't have her name written down. That sort of trauma.
Which sound you talking about, Miss?
No, not Miss. I'm gonna get to Miss. Shout out to Audrey McDonald. The Jewish Parisian, the Jewish friend in Germany. When
Kate.
Kate.
In the film, her name's Kate. Vera Farmiga is the actress.
Okay. To Kate, when you and your people have experienced said trauma, much like slavery, the trauma still lives in you. It's still in the body. And so for Kate, I'm shooting her a little bell, even though she gets a side eye. The human in me understands how or why she might feel and take the approach that she did, whether I agree or not.
Yeah.
I get it because you're still there. You watched or heard the stories of your family rebuilding, of the country rebuilding. You watched them eradicate um everything Nazi related. It's different for you, but the trauma is still in the body,
Mm-hmm.
body remembers. So I get it. I get why where she came from, but also just side eye because just as real as that is for you and your history and your people, the effects of slavery, Jim Crow, racism, all of that are real for us, for Isabel, because the body remembers. It lives racism and it permeates everything we do. So when we have the conversation of why do you make everything about race? Because everything is about race.
Yeah.
It's
I mean,
embedded in the laws, in our societal structures, in what we do, socialization, like it's in everything.
yeah, even when you ignore it, it's there. So it's
Always.
there. It's just always there.
Always.
And it's just one of those things. I do want to make a correction. That was not Vera was one of the publishers.
Okay.
Or I don't know if that was I don't know if the two women were her agents. I guess
Mhm.
Blair Underwood's character would have been her publisher or her
Amari.
editor, maybe.
Yeah.
Either way, the woman who played uh, the woman that you were speaking about in the scene, that's Connie Nielsen.
Okay.
Her name was Sabine, if I'm pronouncing that right in the film. I want to rewind earlier to this conversation.
Mhm.
You mentioned you're not sure how often you'll watch the scene or
Mm,
you'll this film,
mhm.
or when you'll revisit it. And I thought the same thing upon my first watch.
Mhm.
I even had in my notes that I wanted to ask you specifically, what would it take for you to even watch this film again? But something happened to me on the second watch.
Okay.
Excuse my long-windedness because I feel it coming. Here's something we talked earlier about how this film, even if you don't know, even if you try to dissect what it makes you feel, it makes you feel something, right?
Mhm.
One thing that I appreciate about this film is not for the people who don't care. It's not for the people who don't know what they're talking about,
Yeah.
right? And I get very ornery with things at this part of my life,
Mhm.
very peeved at just simple bullshit. And
Mhm.
one of the things is we live in a society where just it's perfectly fine for you to just blurt out stuff and have no idea what you're talking about,
Yeah.
but yet present it as truth or present it as fact or present it as gospel, whatever you want to call it. And there's so much misinformation. It's Rachel is one of the things that drives me crazy when people take no time to research something. You
Mhm.
might be in a group chat and somebody sends an article, and this took 10 seconds to find out it was fake,
Mhm.
right? Who else did you send this to, and who else are you making them think that this is true? Like
Mhm.
it's just a misinformation era. If we keep it lighter, if you're keeping up with what's going on in the rap world, there's a rap Infinity War, Drake and everybody, Kendrick, J. Cole, everybody, the whole nine. Uh, but as these diss tracks are leaking or coming out, there's a lot of question like, are these AI tracks?
Yeah.
And some of them are. There are a lot of AI tracks, and people will come out and say, yes, I made this. This wasn't Kendrick. This wasn't Drake. I actually made this track. So much stuff that you can just easily be deceived, right?
Mhm.
This film, if you really want to take part in the conversation, you have to know what you're talking about.
For
So
sure.
I enjoy it for that piece alone.
Mhm.
And it made me question, do I have anything in me to give?
Mm.
And I don't know if I can really answer that question unless I watch it. Well, back up first. First of all, the first step would be to read Isabel Wilkerson's book.
Yeah.
The movie's not the answer.
Mhm.
But if you aren't going to do that and you do speak better or understand better through, films and visuals. I think watching this the second time really, I watched it in a different lens, and that could be partially because I didn't know it was biographical, and I didn't know where the film was taking me.
Mm-hmm.
But I saw it in a different lens the second time, and I thought about it differently the second time, and I was like, I wonder if I watch this a third time at some point, will it nudge me to do some work, or am I so far gone in the world of Jay-Z, Hove? We quote Hove a lot on this podcast. Hove has a bar where he says, "And it's much bigger issues in the world I know, but I first had to take care of the world I know."
Yeah.
Like, my peoples is my priority.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it just is what it is. I'm never going to apologize for that. My peoples is my priority. I care about humanity, care about everyone, but who am I dropping the ball for? My peoples. Like, straight up. Do I have anything in me to step outside of that to join this fight? I don't know. And that's the human side of me. I really don't know. I don't know if this film will motivate me to do it. At first, it makes you extremely sad. And it kind of makes you feel defeated. Like, damn, this is it. This is just what it's going to be. And then the second watch, it's like, you know what? Maybe there is something. I don't know what that is, but maybe I can contribute to joining it. And I don't know if I've already hit my fucking stage of life where I'm just like, you know what, it is what it is.
Yeah.
It's all a big nothing.
Interesting enough. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just saying, in the words of Olivia Soprano on The Sopranos, it's all a big nothing. Like, what are we doing here, right? Like, what's the purpose of all of this if you really want to start having those talks? But go ahead, Rachel.
I was going to say, ironically enough, it made me feel like, damn, you got to get back on it. And not from a perspective of teaching other races about the horrors of chattel slavery and racism. Not that. But it made me say, you need to get back on it for your own people. Like, are you doing enough to bring the next generation forward? Are you doing enough to educate, to show these wayward youth another way? Or not just them, but just people in general? Are you lifting to climb enough? And beyond race, I think that was a big part of this. There's a discourse on Twitter that talks about there aren't cookouts anymore. Not just because we actually are the aunties and we should be on the grill, guys. Well, maybe not me, you know.
I just thought about Michael Irvin. We're losing recipes.
But we are not in I mean, it's definitely still funny. I was gonna say not in a funny sense, like what he said it, but we are not nearly as communal as we used to be. Forget as a society, because that's a wrap. If we just say as a people, we are not as communal as we once were. And maybe that is due to socialization and upward mobility with everyone for self. Maybe some of it is quote unquote crabs in the barrel. I don't know. But we have to get back to it because we are in fact losing recipes. You know, you got to get on recipes.com for some mac and cheese. Like, what's going on?
Hey, listen, and that's not just that's a real thing, Rachel, what you just said about just this generation not being communal in that same sense. I would love to know where that comes from, and that's a whole nother conversation. It made me immediately think of this song. Kanye has a song on Life of Pablo called Real Friends. And there's a lyric when they're just kind of talking about how it is at get-togethers now, or family get-togethers. Like, there's a lyric where somebody says, "Couldn't tell you much about the fam, dog. I just showed up for the yams, dog." Like, not knowing your cousin's kids' names, stuff like that, where it's just, and it's always the same cycle. You go to these functions, you haven't seen your peoples, you haven't really checked in, and then you commit to doing that. Damn, cuz had a good time. Man, you know, I'll keep up. You do the whole phone number thing. Keep up, and it just doesn't happen. And no blame when you get to a certain point of life. That's just kind of what it is. It really, you know, just like anything else, how I said that this film is an emotional watch. You have to choose to every morning you have to choose your mood. Like I think when we were growing up and you're younger and the world is your oyster and you have this big bright future in front of you, I think we've experienced enough hurt and enough reality to kind of get what's going on. It's almost like we low key the fool if we think it's going to be anything else in this, right? And that's not the great place to live in. You still has to be some hope mixed in there, and I don't know where it starts. And it's funny because I can hear Mo. Shout out to Mo. I can hear him right now probably saying like, "Hey, I think a big part of this is because neither one of you have children." I know a lot of what he does is for his children. And I think a lot of people, their purpose, the same way I'm saying, hey, does this push me forward to do my part in the world? I think people do that through their children, through the future and things like that. The same reason I coach, just to share whatever knowledge I have about sports and life with them. So I don't know. I feel like I should. I mean, I'm the same, Rachel, we went to school together. So I've seen Rachel at the protest, man. I mean, Rachel, Gen 6 protests. We're all black today. We marching, all types of stuff. Like, for real, like straight up. Like it was really some black shit. Like you were young and you're just so full of life and vigor. And now we about to change. And, 15, 16, 17 plus years later, you start like, man, y'all got it.
Yeah.
and and there's people out there doing the work, and I don't want to say there's something that can be done. Like I said, this isn't. I'm a big believer in solutions. I read some reviews saying that one of the only issues with this film was it didn't really provide any answers or solutions. And my immediate response was, I don't think that was the intent.
Yeah, not at all.
To start it's to do what we're doing right now. It's to start the conversation and figure out what those solutions are, and to bring awareness and acknowledgement, like I mentioned earlier, and the whole nine. So it's there's a couple more things I want to speak about before we wrap things up, but I just want to say like it's okay to not know right now. Like this is there was a quote in the film that I think defines the movie perfectly. It was when Blair Underwood's character, they're at the party, and it's her and her husband, and they're just talking about the Trayvon thing. Have you heard the tapes? And it's when she first introduces the idea of why is it racism? Why is it always racism? Why is everything racism? And she is starting to dive into these questions. And she tells him, I don't do assignments anymore. I want to be in the story, really inside the story. And that takes time. And I think that quote is probably the perfect definition of this film. Like, and that it goes back to what I just said about how many times will I watch this. I think it takes time to really understand, peel back the layers. Not for all of it. I will say that not for all of it. There are some things that are very, if you're 30 plus and black, you just know. Like you're not getting anything from it per se, but there are some things that are very interesting that may cause you to dig a little deeper. But yeah, take your time with this one. This is not a film that's, it wouldn't surprise me if you took a break or a pause, especially upon that first viewing, because it is a lot and it's a lot of different directions. Like I said, even dealing with trauma and loss and all that. But a couple scenes that I'll go ahead. Well, I
was going to say, I was going to delve into a scene, but you mentioned being 30 plus and black. You just kind of know. It reminded me of the scene where Isabel, her mother, and her husband and Brett are watching or listening to the trial or something to that effect. And her mother goes, he was too young to know. He didn't know. And we talked a little bit about racism and Jim Crow and this, that, and the third. Her mother was obviously a woman of a particular age. And I think that the progress, quote unquote, that we have made questionable is that Trayvon Martin, well, he was 17 years old,
16, I believe.
17. For her to say he was too young to know how to react to white people, to be walking in a hoodie at night in this random white neighborhood. He didn't know. That speaks to lack of conversation, because a 16, 17-year-old boy in her time already knows. And I think,
Mhm.
again, I talked about how we don't quote unquote talk about race and we're not as communal as we once were. I don't think those conversations, even though we've seen the Dove commercials, like when you have the talk, are people having the talk the way that maybe our generation experienced the talk in that understanding. And I mean, y'all know one of my parents is a police officer, a retired police officer. So still had to talk, you know, as
Mhm.
a young black wild child.
Yeah. Yeah, it's real.
It just, that scene was gut wrenching to me. And when Brett said, when I think Isabel said, "Is that true? Is that intimidating? A young black boy in your neighborhood, that's intimidating to all white people." And they spoke throughout the film, during his life, how he constantly defied the odds, how he was probably the most anti-racist, anti-prejudiced, white man alive, quote unquote.
Yeah.
But for him to sit with that and then come to the thought and say, you know what? Yeah, it's probably some truth to that. That is how we move forward, is understanding that and then having that realization and then committing to a plan to move past that.
Yeah, I think that was very well said, Rachel. That was very well said. Um, I
Thank
guess the issue would be that there just aren't a lot of Bretts out there.
you. For sure.
Um,
For
there
sure.
aren't a lot of people that are willing to be Brett, and
Mhm.
I feel like we do the lifting of being Brett on top of being ourselves and everything else. We're always the
Mhm.
one that are extending to understand and bending to understand and making ourselves available to understand what other people go through. Um, when we don't get that same courtesy, and it makes it hard to keep extending, and it just makes things like you said, those talks are happening because I think people are trying to they're wishing that it's over and maybe hoping that if I ignore this for long enough it'll just go away, and that's just not the
Yeah.
case. um all right, a couple scenes
Mhm.
and we can go ahead and get out of here, and I think one that's kind of important is the Miss scene.
For sure.
Miss Hale, played by Audrey McDonald,
Queen.
Queen Audrey McDonald. Um, I'll let you get into it. It immediately reminded me, less than a year ago, I spent some time on this podcast saying some words about a good friend of mine, Mr. Simpson.
Mhm.
And even told a little story about his name and things like that. And that was a real thing that I think there was some black people did.
Mhm.
Because there was somebody in my football program as a child. He was a year ahead of me, but his name was Sir.
Mhm.
And if I'm not mistaken, I believe that I heard directly that his name was Sir because similar to how Miss Hale's name was Miss Hale. So shout out to Mr. His birthday's this month. You know, may he rest in peace. As I've said, it's always our responsibility to keep those with us, keep their name going. Almost like the beautiful / heartbreaking scene of Isabel saying goodbye to her cousin.
Mhm.
Such beautiful words, so much love in that scene, but also so much pain.
Yeah.
The way she just said, "You will be with me every single day," and I remember everything you ever. I don't even want to get into it because I can feel myself just,
Yeah.
man. But shout out to Mister. Such a powerful scene, Rachel. Get into it. What were your takeaways? This was the most. If you want to talk about best single scenes in a film, as far as like this one person came in and gave a performance, they were only in the movie for one scene. I
Talk
know
about
School had told us, yes, that they School told a story about Viola Davis in the movie. She was only in one scene, but she was nominated for Best Supporting.
Mhm.
Um, Audrey, I mean, my goodness,
Yeah.
what an incredible scene.
Yeah.
Um, what are your thoughts on it?
Audra put on such a clinic that it felt real.
It felt, Rachel, it felt, I'm not playing, it felt like a documentary. Like
Mhm.
this is a real person. There's no way, if you did not know, if you did not know who she was, you might be
Mhm.
thinking there's no way she's an actor.
Yeah. It w- in a lighthearted a related but unrelated way, it reminded me of when I first moved from Ohio. I moved to South Carolina with one of my cousins, and we're sitting at the nail shop, and this white lady looks at me. She goes, "You know, I typically don't like the black girls with the blonde hair, but that looks good on you." Like, what? Um, what? I meant to tell that earlier, but I inserted
That's
it
wild.
here because there is, I don't want to say an audacity, but there is a brashness um that just comes with, I don't want to say it, but just comes with a southern whiteness in speaking to black people because of the history of this land. And when Miss Hale was telling the story of being a sophomore and essentially the principal riding her, asking her for her name,
Yeah.
just refusing to believe that her name could possibly be Miss. You think that I'm being truculent. You think that I'm being disrespectful to you
Right.
because my name is Miss.
Right.
I'm a young girl. Why wouldn't you want to call me that? You would call me Miss Ann. You know what I'm saying? You
Yeah.
might call me, it reminds me of Secret Life of Bees, where
Okay.
Lily and Jennifer Hudson's character, her name escapes me right now. They are walking into this shop in South Carolina, and before they get to the pink house, and the shop owner looks at her and says, "Don't you look smart?" What?
Wow.
Just a random compliment for this little white girl who's doing nothing other than sitting there. And this black person, like, there's always the expectation of servitude. There's always the expectation of deference, not a mutual deference, but you to me.
Mm-hmm.
So
It's a
to
birth.
tell,
It's a birthright.
for sure,
Yeah.
for sure. And so to tell that story, and it matters. And we think about Texas as its own brand of racism. And we think
Mm-hmm.
about the importance of Juneteenth, you know, that is technically specific to
Mm-hmm.
Texas, where it was
Absolutely.
old, almost 2 years before slavery was, after slavery was over, before those the enslaved there even knew that they were free. You know what I'm saying?
Facts. Absolutely.
So all of that matters. And you think of Alabama, the principal said, "You're not from here. I can tell because you're looking me in the eye." I will
Unless.
say it's not as dominant, obviously, hopefully, but it is still a thing. And I
Oh.
realized that once I moved, especially while I was still in South Carolina. Ohio is Ohio, you know, and it has its own
Yeah. It's
its own
different down there,
yeah, especially Southern Ohio is
and
tricky.
it's not. Yeah. 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 To your point, Rachel, because I
Mhm.
was just about to say it before you got into it. If you haven't been to the South, and I'm not talking about South like Houston,
Mhm.
um,
Atlanta.
Atlanta, even Birmingham to a degree.
Mhm.
I'm not even talking about that South or Memphis. No, I'm talking about like one stoplight in the town South.
For sure. For sure.
Those like dirt road South, like that is 1,000%,
Yeah,
1,000% still there.
for sure.
And sad, and even more sad is the respectability politics are still there as well.
For sure. For sure. And
Because
not
the
just
society
down there,
is
at home too.
at home, but it's just a different world. It's almost you wouldn't even believe it was 2024 in some
Yeah,
areas.
yeah.
Yeah, it's just a wild thing.
And
But
I'll say
I
this.
just
Go
yeah.
ahead.
No, go ahead, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say this, and I'm not saying all of this to like bark on the South because I am now a Southern Black woman. I hope to stay here
Love the
forever
South.
and
Love the
entrench
South.
my life and live as a Southern belle, Southern, not necessarily belle, but The history and the roots, like I'm playing it. They're not as deep, despite family being from um Alabama and South Carolina, ironically enough.
Mhm.
But like I want to stay here and just build out the history. It's just I feel rooted here, so I don't want to make it sound
Yeah.
like they're harping or talking down on the South. The South got
Yeah.
something to
No,
say.
absolutely. I'm glad you said that because that was more so of an observation from a person people who were born in the
Two
Midwest.
Northerners,
Yes, yes. Northerners to y'all, Midwest to everybody else.
for sure.
However, there's nothing like going down to the South and just feeling a certain connection,
Hmm.
uh, with your history, with your ancestors, with your blackness as a whole, all of
Yes,
that. So shout out to the South, man. It's a beautiful place.
for sure,
And also, if you aren't familiar with it, it can be an um, eye-opening experience.
for sure,
Eye-opening experience, depending on where you are.
for sure.
I have, we don't have to get into any other scenes, particularly in my
Did you want to
opinion.
say anything else about Miss Hale?
No, I just think that was a beautiful performance, and the fact
Yeah.
that I thought that you could have told me that was a real thing,
Hmm.
a real documentary, and I would have believed it. I think you covered everything perfectly.
Okay.
I don't think there's anything I need to say to step on that. Um, I know we're not really doing scenes. There's not a come see about me moment, but there is an I'm checking for you moment, which I
Uh-huh.
thought was incredible.
Yeah.
Which was when Brett came over when she was having issues with the nest in her yard.
Hmm.
Um, Rachel and myself get compliments from people specifically about our takes and our conversations when it comes to romance,
Hmm.
when it comes to like things like that. And I just thought that was for one, Brett, played by John Bernthal, who I'm
Who
a
I
huge fan of.
hmm
You said what?
who I love.
Yeah, John Bernthal is incredible. Huge fan of him. It's funny because seeing him play this role, I'm like, oh, they picked the perfect white dude for this.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
because it's not forced at all. It's believable.
Hmm.
Like I just feel like he's just a good dude anyway.
Hmm.
But there was something just so genuine about, hey, I see you in trouble. Um, I don't want to just step in, which I don't think he did that because she was black. I think he just did that anyway. Like I think he
Hmm.
just seemed like a respectful person. Like on some like I'm not you a grown woman, and I respect the fact that you're a grown woman.
Yeah.
I also can see that there's a little bit of friction. Is it
Hmm.
cool if I come in and just kind of,
Yeah.
what I mean, use what I got to your advantage? And obviously, you got it done. And that's, I mean, I couldn't imagine many more things that would get a woman's attention. And it's like, hey man, like,
For
bro,
sure. That's a
did
man.
you
That's
not hear what she said?
my
Like, you getting paid, right? Like, you ain't doing this for free, right? Like, we'll finish the job.
Talk
Um,
about using your privilege for good, because if he was black, that would have went different.
It would have been 100% different. But
Yeah,
he knew, and he not only did he know, he was aware enough to acknowledge it. Like, hey,
for
was I
sure.
mansplaining?
For sure.
I don't want to come off as a white savior. She's like, what you know about that?
Yeah.
But even the introduction, like I'm
Mhm.
Brett, Isabel, I know, like
Yeah.
I've been checking for you, and the genuine just. It's my birthday, man. Like, come on, man. Like, have some cake. My mom will love it. It will make my day special. I didn't, birthdays aren't important to me, but you said it's a big deal to you. Make my day special then.
For sure.
Like, just the like the joy he had when she said yes. I just thought that was cool, especially we didn't talk a ton about this, but the way Ava pieced this film together
Yeah.
and gave us certain pieces of scenes, and then they disappear, and then they come back, and then
Mhm.
you see their argument start, but it doesn't end, and then you go back to it when she's reminiscing,
Mhm.
um, and just having that scene of seeing how they met,
Yeah.
and just saying, "Oh, okay, then that was dope." Because I did forget to say this about Miss Hale's scene when they're in the kitchen afterwards.
Mhm.
Um, what was the word? What did it say? What was the phrase, Rachel? It was about, but we didn't break. Was it break?
Maybe.
uh it was something about we didn't break, like things were, and
Mhm.
that's when she even started thinking about Brett, because just talking about things being pulled from you and just things just
Mhm.
going, just falling apart, and how how sacred the things that didn't go that route are to
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
And obviously made her sad because their time was cut short.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, all of that. It was just a beautiful. It's one of those things. Like I said, when you look at all the pessimism that the world can, put in front of your face, it
Yeah.
is good to see something that seems like natural. It seems like this was supposed to work. Like this
Mm-hmm.
brings joy,
Mm-hmm.
um, to the world in a sense, their world, whatever you want to call it. But I just thought that was dope. I was, like I said, when it comes see about me, but I'm definitely checking for you. Like
Yeah, I'm definitely checking for you. To your point, it wasn't come see about me, but he came and saw about her. Like,
yeah, he did. He did. It wasn't all the way there, but he did.
but he definitely did. Shout out to that. I love men. And
Yeah,
I could
man. They said there ain't a ton of them left, Rachel. They said there ain't a ton of us left.
no, there are. I don't want to say that. We're not
I
being
know. I'm
pessimistic
talking
this
shit.
episode.
I'm talking shit. If you listen to Twitter, that's what they're saying.
For sure, for sure. But
But
yeah,
yeah,
no,
Rachel,
it's a beautiful scene. I liked it. Cute. Mhm.
did you have anything else that you kind of want to discuss about the film at all?
Um, not really. If you don't know the history of Natchez, Mississippi, please look it up. Um, there's a deep, rich, uh, warrior spirit about Natchez. Um, Lots of racial trauma, lots of bloodshed. Natchez is a very, very, very important city to any racial study, well, Black study, understanding, discussion. Look at Natchez. Shout out to people who cross the racial lines and do the work together, because that is how we survive as a people. There was a scene, not necessarily a scene. We kind of talked about Isabel and her cousin,
Mm-hmm.
their relationship,
Marion.
Marion, super important. And I just want to also say, um, Niecy Nash and Archanu Ellis Taylor are perfect casting as cousins. If you told me that they actually are cousins, I will believe you.
Yeah, 100%.
Like, that is 1000% perfect casting.
I don't know how I meant to say this at the very beginning of this episode, Rachel.
Mhm.
Um, this is our sixth film that we've done with Anjanou Ellis Taylor.
Mhm.
Um, hmm.
I can't
I'm
wait for
trying to make
Hollywood to really see her.
I'm trying to make sure I say this because I don't want it to come off as hyperbole.
Mhm.
All right. I know this isn't the best acting performance that I've ever seen. I know that, right?
Mhm.
But there's also something in me that says, "Are you sure?"
Yeah.
Um, it's so good you don't even catch how good it is.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, I as someone who usually has words to say, always the right things to say, I don't know how to properly describe what Anjanou Ellis Taylor did in this film from an
Mhm.
acting perspective, from top to bottom. It was one of the most incredible performances that I've ever seen from anyone
Mhm.
in a film.
You cannot
On
take your eyes off of her.
it, you, it's criminal almost. Like, and the reason I said it earlier, we were talking about the Black Real Awards. I don't even remember who I said
Mhm.
was my best actor. It's Anjanou Ellis Taylor. We didn't have a chance to see it and really give it the proper credit and the proper flowers, which is why we're doing this now.
Mhm.
But from the film perspective, it was, like I said, it sounds crazy to say it's the best,
Yeah.
and it's probably not. It's probably not.
Mhm.
But damn it, you really got to sit down and question that. I've been on record saying that I'm not a fan of something being out for a short period of time and you already calling it a classic or you calling it the best ever, yada yada yada. It has to stand the test of time and go through that history. this was an instant classic from her, from an acting performance. I mean, I just see the film. I'm not gonna keep talking. Just see the film and see it for yourself. But I don't know if you want to add anything to that. But my goodness, I was so moved by her performance.
She put on a clinic, and I want to say this. We just spoke about how it wasn't out for a long time. It was in limited theaters. Ingenue, she and my friend, Miss Ingenue Ellis Taylor was out doing her own promo. And we think about this juxtaposed against the American fictions, the Oppenheimers, the Barbies, everything big that came out where there was a machine behind it. This is damn near an independent film, you know. She was out doing the work, doing the promotion. So in a handful of theaters that did get it for more than one showing, like she was doing her best to get it out there. And the way that I feel about Ingenue Ellis Taylor is how I feel about Regina Hall.
Yeah.
So criminally underrated, and only now I think it's Hollywood starting to bark up Regina Hall's tree. I hope that the same happens for Ingenue Ellis Taylor, because she is so phenomenal in everything she does. I mean,
Yeah.
we talked about if Bill Street could talk last week. She wasn't in it for a long time, but it impactful in her two films, you know, Scene Stiller.
Look at a film like King Richard.
King Richard.
She outperformed Will, in my opinion. I know Will won the Oscar. I think she had a better performance.
Ray, we literally just talked about it last week.
Right?
There is nothing that she cannot do.
In Range, let's talk about Range, Undercover Brother. We spoke about her in that film.
Yeah.
A film that we have not touched yet, but is a favorite of Rachel and mine, and I think school loves it just as much. Men of Honor.
Yeah.
The resume is legit.
For sure.
The proof is there.
For sure.
She's been doing this. And to your point, Rachel, I hope that everyone is on notice for how good she is. This is one of those films where you just know it goes to the old cliche line, like, you know, you don't know if the movie's any good unless it doesn't make any money or if nobody sees it.
Yeah.
The subject matter is not going to cause it to. A lot of people aren't going to be clamoring.
Yeah.
But if you watch this film, man, my goodness, it felt like a documentary. It felt real. You couldn't tell me she wasn't Isabel.
Yeah.
Like if I didn't know, like, you know what I mean? It just felt so real. So obviously, great cast. Not just Ingenue Ellis Taylor. We have John Bernthal, as we talked about, or Bernthal, excuse me. Vera Farmiga, Audra McDonald, Niecy Nash Betts, Nick Offerman, who had it's probably the one scene that I say, all right, you might be stretching a little bit with the whole Make America Great, leak and sink. I get it. Don't know if it was necessarily needed, but I get what you were trying to do there. And obviously the greats, the legendary, the treasure that he is in the culture. Another gentleman who's not talked about enough, another gentleman who I love to see in major roles, Mr. Blair Underwood. Shout out to him and the rest of this cast. This film was necessary, is needed. I'm glad we had a chance to watch it. I'm glad that you picked it. I hope that I can step up to the challenge.
Yeah.
And maybe even at the worst, even if it just makes me move forward in some sense, you know, maybe the concept of trying to take on the whole world at once is a little bit ambitious. But maybe if everybody has that same feeling of, all right, let's just at least take the first step, that'll go a long way for us.
For sure.
But as far as the film goes, and obviously Ava DuVernay and Isabel Wilkerson, shout out to them for this. I don't have anything else in that regard. Do you?
I don't either. Sorry, I serious us out this week, guys.
Yeah. No, that's all good. It's all good. You know what I mean? This is needed from times. We do have some range. Like I said, it's not your traditional Culture Garden episode. If you are a first-time listener, I promise things are much lighthearted and fun. And yeah, we joke and laugh and stuff like that. But this is more of a we got y'all format of the conversation. Had no plans on going an hour 15 minutes, but here we are.
We both said, "Oh, this will be quick."
Yeah, it'd be a quick conversation, but every time we say that, it ends up being longer than what we thought. I will say this: we are going to end the film the same way we always end our others. So, Ray P,
Yes.
the average viewer rates Origin 7.2 out of 10. Too high, too low, just right.
Too low, 8.3.
Too low, 8.
Okay.
Yeah, too low, 8, man. I was just gonna say, if you took Ingenue's performance alone is just
Alone. Yeah.
it's just that's worth it, even if you only watch it once. But yeah, that's it. That's the conversation, y'all. We appreciate y'all having it with us, or at least checking us out if you stayed to the end because of the heaviness. Thank you.
Thank
We
you.
will be back next week. Have no idea what it's my selection. Have no idea what we're going to be watching or discussing. But it will not be as deep. I promise. We're going to ease it up for y'all a little bit. Shout out to school. Shout out to school's guilty pleasures.
Sure.
Ray P, shout out to you. I love you. I enjoy having somewhere to have these conversations with you, even though we can have them off mic. It's cool to share them with the world and do it with you. So thank you for always being my dog, my ride or die. You know what I'm saying? This thing don't break. If that was the right phrase.
It don't break.
Nah, it ain't breaking, man. So and obviously thank y'all. Thanks for tuning in. We appreciate y'all. Y'all be cool. Y'all be cool.
We need each other, y'all. Peace out.
Peace out.
Peace in the Middle East.
Nah, for real.
For real.
For real. All right, y'all be cool.